Welcome to Are We the Only Ones? I'm Kathy, and I'm going to talk about a couple things. One is the real Bubba. Apparently, in case you didn't know, there was a releasing of the Epstein emails. Uh, First, it was the Democrats, and then the Republicans decided to release, I believe it was 20,000 emails. And in one of those emails was an email from Mark Epstein to Jeffrey Epstein asking if Putin had the picture of Trump blowing Bubba. Now, over the weekend, it was wildfire that Bubba was Bill Clinton. Even Bill Clinton was asked about it, and he had a very coy sort of like look at the camera, which is just so Clinton of him to do that. It was so funny. Um, but Mark Epstein has since clarified that it is not Bill Clinton. And I recall him saying it. I read an article where he said that it was Bubba and it was some other, like the person's name is actually Bubba and it's a billionaire, I believe in oil. Now, since I've tried to look that up again, I haven't been able to find it. However, there are definitely like People Magazine, other publications that have said that they've talked to Mark Epstein and he has clarified that it is not Bill Clinton. So I would also like to clarify that it is not Bill Clinton. Um, but that was kind of irrelevant, right? Bill Clinton is basically getting his name cleared in this release of the emails, which is not expected. But, you know, the entire, what about Clinton being in there? I heard Clinton talk about a nothing burger. Okay, so far, right? Are there pictures that I have seen of him getting massaged? Yes. Do I know for sure if they're real? No. But they're of a grainy sort and they do look like they're in the right era. However, that doesn't do anything. The woman didn't look like a child, so that's important. Um, but that's not really the point, right? There's still an email from Mark Epstein talking to Jeffrey Epstein asking about whether or not Putin has a picture of Trump blowing whoever. It doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, the embarrassing thing is that there is even a picture of any sort, a reference of any sort like that, that would put the current president of the United States, who is somebody who is super corrupt and somebody that we know is willing to starve poor people, is willing to destroy historical architecture in the East Wing, and somebody who doesn't have a respect for history, like truly doesn't respect history in the way that we understand you're supposed to revere and respect history, for it to be an email situation, for it to be a grab him by the pussy candidate, later becomes president, later does an insurrection. That, by the way, I saw an interview with Mitch McConnell where he was talking about that Donald Trump had used a racial slur when referring to Mitch McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao, who is Chinese. And Mitch McConnell decided not to engage because he decided it wasn't worth it because Trump is, I guess, too difficult to engage in a public, obviously, battle with. I mean, Trump has even referred to Rosie O'Donnell recently, how she will not ever be allowed to come back to the United States because he's doing something with visas where if you're like, not necessarily just overweight, but overweight to the point that you have maybe diabetes or something that the administration could argue that it's a health strain on our health insurance or something like that. But that, I mean, the level of pettiness that he's still referring to Rosie O'Donnell after all this is like kind of, you have bigger things to worry about, sir. You have been implicated in one of the most scandalous things that can happen to a presidency. Way bigger than Watergate. Watergate is nothing compared to this. Nothing compared to this. Um, Like, if I was going to say what Watergate was compared to what this is, if you were looking at like a tsunami wave coming at you, Watergate would be like the end of the sea foam that like finally comes up on the shore. That's like 10 centimeters deep. That's Watergate. What this is a, if you're a surfer, 3-set wave. If you want tsunami, if you want to talk about, you know, oh my God, I can't even think of like the Portugal 100-foot wave place. Like it's like that. Okay. It's like that. And I'm glad that we had a line that stood and that the Republicans finally decided that they were going to have a line that they would hold. And it was a line of morality that we needed to hold in this country so that from a historical and future geopolitical standpoint, we needed it to be at least something where you could say like we still have a like a moral sense of ourselves and that no, we do stand up for children with all the crazy arguments about political stuff that has to do with kids and women's reproductive health. At least when we were talking about like, okay, we have an actual serious situation in our government. And then we actually need to hold this person accountable, not just because it's important for today for just the basic decency of human beings in a civilized society, but also because if we have any political capital left, we can only maintain it and retain any of it and rebuild it if we hold this line. He has to be held accountable for all of the lies, all of the things that he said. In addition, like the cover up is normally in like Watergate was worse than the crime. This crime is so bad that there's no amount of cover up, even how bad the cover up could be, could not be worse than the actual crime. And there's paper trails in Trump model management history. There's just the historical 2018 tender age prisons where the Trump administration decided to have a zero tolerance policy and separate babies and toddlers from their parents. And the Obama administration had the prisons, but it was a very, very rare situation where they would separate parents from their children. And it was only in the most violent, drug related type of criminals. Otherwise, they would keep the parents and the children together. The Trump administration is the administration that went zero tolerance and decided under Jeff Sessions to separate babies and toddlers from their parents. Okay. And if you have ever worked with children or you understand the psychology and the trauma that children would face from being separated from their parents at such a young age, it is impossible. You cannot fix it. It's not something you can heal. It's a permanent situation. So this is where we're all layering this like multi-layer, I don't want to say cake, but like, this multi-layer situation where Donald Trump is such a just horrible about just the basic decency of the office of the president to take care of the most vulnerable people, whether they're your citizens or not. If they're in your borders, they have due process. So first you systematically take away due process, you take away the sanctity of a parent-child relationship, especially when they're young. You uh, take away SNAP benefits from your own people. It gets overturned and you decide you're going to double down and try to appeal and try to fight that. You try not to even release the funds. You have to have governors releasing funds to make sure that their people are fed, the babies are fed. These are all things that from the most basic, you don't need to have an education. You don't have to be like an intellectual. You don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to have the high school degree to understand that is so cruel and beyond heinous as a leader that was elected democratically, supposedly, because now I'm looking at like this wave of Democrats showing up and I'm starting to wonder. Now, the Dominion voting machines have been sold to a Trumper. And so we do have to be concerned about the next election and certain things like that. But, what I'm saying, the main thing is that there's a lack of education and understanding of just how, like, the basic decency of what our government is supposed to do. Feed people, SNAP benefits were not supposed to be defunded ever. There was already contingency language to make sure it was funded, even if there was a government shutdown on the table. To have all that language on there, they deleted it. Okay. So I'm just reminding for context that if you're going to say that one party or one particular, it's not even about a party right now. Okay. This is about a specific White House, a specific person who uses the most cruel forms of power in order to protect himself from the obvious corruption that we can all see that's about to be unveiled, right? He doesn't want to be unveiled, right? Along the lines of just understanding that this is one of the things that I've noticed on the whole like, oh, Obama did it too, Trump did. I just want to like bottom line this argument because I've been seeing it a lot on the tender age prison reel that I had posted. And it doesn't, there's a lot of weird deflection about like, oh, it was in 2018. Oh, this was Obama also did it. I want to remind everybody that humanity is about fixing the problem that you know is wrong now. Blaming it on a previous whoever, time, year, administration, government, whatever, is irrelevant if it's happening now. And if anything, that would be hindsight to tell you that's wrong so that you would fix it now. To use that as some kind of justification to wait, to delay, is idiotic, moronic, and I'm just going to say right now, it can no longer be effective. You guys don't let that stuff like work. Okay. Like I can't, if I have to hear another person say Obama had these freaking prisons, like as if that makes any difference. And then I had to clarify that Obama did not use those prisons to separate babies from their parents unless it was the most dangerous criminal in which you probably wouldn't want them with the baby anyway. Like that would be common sense. Okay. So I want to clear that. All right. Now, going into education and just talking about like this for sure is a lack of education. Now, one of the hardest things in a global social media world is where you have other countries looking at us and saying like, how do you guys let this happen? Like, what do you do? And it's good that we see other countries hold us to account because sometimes we're in this weird American echo chamber where we don't realize like other people are watching and that they're embarrassed for us because they don't operate in this way. And it's important that we realize that we are not the only people. Americans are not the only people on this planet. Okay. And that the way that we run things and the way that our culture is not actually the way that everybody reacts and responds. Like everybody in the world that's in a first world nation has healthcare. We're the only ones that don't. I've used healthcare in other countries, in Australia specifically, and in Japan. And I'm going to tell you right now, we should be embarrassed because we get taxed at a rate in which we should be able to afford it. And Australian government also allows visitors like us to use their system as if like we're just, like think if you're being a host and you want to treat your visitors and they get hurt in your home and you would like not yell at them and tell them that they're like lazy aliens that like visited your home, they aren't eligible to get a bandage or like eligible to get like care from you, right? You want to be a good host. You want to take care of the people in your home. You want, if they're visiting, if they get hurt, you take care of them. That's how Australia's policy is. Within an hour, my husband had an appointment, got to see a doctor, got to get referred for Eastern medicine help across the hallway, and it only cost like $139 plus two prescriptions for a total cost of $11. So I want you guys to understand their tax rate is 40%. They also give 45 minutes massage to every single citizen. I think it's every month. It could be every week. I wouldn't be surprised if it was every week. Why? Because they also pay for half the hotel bill. If you're somebody that's bound to a wheelchair and you go to a 5-star hotel, they pay for 50% of that hotel bill as part of your national health care. Australia runs just like America, except they don't tip and they don't, and college is free. And I mean, it's competitive, but college is free and they have good college. And if you don't get a good job, you don't have to pay back. If you get a good job after you get into college and you graduate and you get a good job, then you have to pay back. That's fair. They also have amazing. I went to Brisbane. My family lives in Brisbane. I have a lot of family in Brisbane. Okay. Why? Because Vietnamese during the war had two places that loved them: Paris, France in general, and Australia. Americans were okay, but I was just say there's a Vietnamese like museum in Australia to commemorate the contributions of Vietnamese Australians have made to Australia. That's progress. Okay. Remember, Australians were Rupert Everett. I mean, sorry, Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch, head of Fox News, comes from. He gets to enjoy healthcare that we don't. And yet he comes here and preaches all kinds of bullshit about how we shouldn't get it when he gets it and his family gets it. It's ridiculous. I just want you to understand, like, we are, those of you that uphold these systems, you don't realize that, like, you're like the Megan Kellys of the world, freaking splicing 5-year-old, 15-year-old pedophile freaking behavior. These are people that don't deserve you holding up and defending them, okay? They need to help you. They need to serve you. They need to provide services for you. They didn't make your life better. You've been supporting these particular politicians in these red states. Please recognize this is your opportunity to demand better, because Democrats will support you. We will help you. We don't want you to starve, okay? It's one of the most important things that I don't think people understand. If you travel in other countries and you see how other countries do things better, it will help you understand why it's ridiculous when we're being told that it can't be done, because it can. Not just one country, not just two different countries, multiple countries getting things done right. Okay. Just even the fact that, like, I can go to Japan and I can wash my hands in a sensor faucet and it will work 100% of the time versus in America tells you we are falling behind. Okay. Leads me to my next point. UCSD had released an executive summary, actually just released an executive summary expressing that incoming students are not proficient in math, science, or language arts, to the extent that it is notably increasingly unprepared for quantitative and analytical rigor expected at UCSD. That is the quote from the executive summary. So, what does it tell you? That the dummy down of America? Look, I was on a reality show. I understand why reality shows provided a space in America. I was on a fashion reality show. I understand why that was there, but now I want you to understand that all of the reality show permeation of culture and thinking in our lives has reduced our ability to critically think and to expect more from each other, honestly. And UCSD expressing that there's not enough. I think it was, they said from 2020 to 2025, they noticed a huge reduction in the ability for the new students that are coming incoming classes to do the math and the quantitative skills that were required to be able to study the engineering or organic science, whatever, like medical, whatever the things that they needed. Because UCSD is one of the top engineering schools and schools in STEM. So I can only imagine how hard it would feel. Like, and if we're not letting students come in from other countries, then we have, um, we get to recruit some of the students when they learn from us and they want to stay. We get to recruit them and then they get to stay, and then they've kind of acclimated to the United States, so they really like being here. So it's not a negative, but it is also positive when the students go back to their home nations, and then they sort of import American culture from what they've learned into their home countries. And that's why you see like right now Vietnam is very advanced. I mean, I remember I went to Vietnam when I was 12 and there was hamburgers that were done on baguettes. And there's a lot of like change. And now you have um Vietnam has some of the I think they just got voted one of the maybe the top food destination in the world. And there's a lot of technology in Vietnam that's growing, and they have a lot of money not just from America, but they have money from Australia, they have money from Russia, they have money from so many other places that's going in there. And racism in Vietnam doesn't really exist the same way it exists in other nations, right? So like Vietnamese racism is more like the extent is like the way the language works. It's like let's say for instance, like American is me, and then it'll be like American whatever color. So it'd be like me dang is like a white American. Me dang is like a black American. Uh, it would be like for a Mexican, it'd be May, which is a person of Mexican descent, is what that translates to. But Vietnamese people don't keep you from working if you're a different race. They don't keep they're not gonna hurt you. They don't they share things with you. They don't as a culture in Vietnam, it's not racism where like you're gonna be hurt. There's no violence towards you. You're safe. It's just more of like oh, they're different and you discuss the cultural difference, but you're safe. So the difference between like racism in Western nations is like you actually are kept from, unlike the easiest thing, it's just like, oh, kept from a nightclub, right? So I know in France, it can be racist in the sense where it's not obvious. Like you can't go into a nightclub if you're a certain, I don't know, complexion. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. You have to know somebody. It's like one of those things. And that was years ago. So it could be different now. But like in Europe in general, you can't say anything that's hate speech. That's completely legal. Whereas in America, it's protected by the First Amendment that you can say whatever you want, including hate speech, because it's the idea is that you don't want to block out free speech that would be progressive speech. So you have to allow both, right? But it's one of the things that becomes a problem in our politics, right? That we have differentiations in American politics that goes into race, but also gender. And one of the things that I was happy to see, there was a conversation recently about how because Marjorie Taylor Greene has come out and apologized for her role in the toxic, excuse me, toxic political divide. And yeah, I choked on that, even just like realizing that that happened. But it's real. It's not AI. And look, progressives have two perspectives on this. One is it's a cautiously optimistic perspective. We'll see. We'll believe it when we see it. It's words right now. Let's see actions. My perspective is I think it's time, if we have done all this work to try to convince them that they're wrong, then when we finally did our job and we're successful and they come over to our fold, shouldn't we welcome them in so that we don't have to repeat the work again? Because if we call them names or don't believe them, they'll more likely go, fine, they didn't believe me anyway. They're going to go back to the other side. What would be the point of doing that? That would be a waste of all the work that we put in, right? Secondly, I think it's time for them to do some heavy lifting. If she wants to do some heavy lifting and help us out, because I'm exhausted, it would be wonderful for her to pick up the mantle and express that she was wrong. And usually those are the most effective people to go talk to those people that we're trying to convince is someone who was once like them, right? Right. Okay. And thirdly, I'm not saying I'm giving her, this is exactly what I had said to a friend of mine who was bringing this up. I'm not saying I'm giving her the keys to the corporate bathroom, okay? I am also waiting to see how far she is aligned with us. I'm not making her our heir apparent. I'm not saying that she is the leader that we turn to. What I am saying, though, is this proves the mission of Vote Renly that women should run. We want more women holding office. And that in the end, even if a woman is not necessarily on the progressive side of female reproductive health, that a woman will stand up for what's right, even when it's not safe for her to do so. Why? Because we're used to it not being safe for us to do so. What's the difference now? Right? So please understand the nuance. We have succeeded. This is a victory for progressives everywhere, especially people that, like me, who have actually donated serious coin, put in serious time, and dedicated hours, hours of our lives to trying to speak to these people, reason with them, and not hate on them and believe that they actually were thinking they were doing something right. And now that they can come and see where that is, the right side is with us, and they can humbly come. You know how brave it is to have to apologize? And that also it provides a pathway for other MAGA people to see how you can apologize and be successful in apologizing, coming back and right before Thanksgiving. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a bunch of people at Thanksgiving say, "Oh my God, I finally realized I was wrong," and follow the same apology that Marjorie Taylor Greene gave on the news? Wouldn't that make for a better Thanksgiving? Be humble, progressives. Be kind. If your crazy uncle, whoever, comes to the Thanksgiving and says, "Oh my gosh, I was totally wrong about this. I'm so sorry." Pour him a drink, load him a bowl, light him a cigarette, go for a walk, give him a hug, make him a plate. Do the right thing and be humble and take it as a win. Because if you don't recognize that this is a win and you send them back to the other side, you are not helping. Okay. So please recognize that this is a win. Thanksgiving is going to be great this year. Be kind. You know, this is a good thing, guys. It's a good thing. Okay. Tell me what you think. I'm going to end on that note. Tell me what you think. Please reflect on how good Thanksgiving can be and how kind you can be in taking them back in the fold. And I would love, after Thanksgiving holiday, any stories of success in which this situation occurs and somebody comes and says, "I was wrong," and that you pour them a drink or do whatever to create a peace pipe situation, olive branch situation, so that you can actually heal this rift. That is the true win. Let me know. I need to know because I will totally talk about it on here. I will totally share that because that is the biggest blessing we could possibly have. That is the biggest light at the end of the tunnel. And I really, really need everybody to understand that. Okay. So until next time.